We'll finish realism in this video clip. Firstly, there are two types of realism. One is classical realism and the other is neo-realism. Classical realism, there are two big masters of classical realism. The first one is H. Carl. I mentioned him in the last lecture. The second one is Hans Morgenthau. Because H. Carl, he is a master because he criticized idealism. His main contribution is to criticize idealism and lay the foundation for realism. And also he points a so-called direct orientation for the development of realism. That is, we should not have too many so-called wishful thinking in analyzing international relations, international politics. We have to be very realistic. He laid the foundation. And this one, Morgenthau, he built on this foundation and construct some basic principles for realism. Some basic principles. This book, Politics Among Nations, is a must-read book for all students of international relations. Of course, I read this book. Once I proposed that your midterm test should be reading this Politics Among Nations, and afterwards you have to comment on it. Of course, this is not very practical, not very realistic. So I discard this idea. Then, what is his major suggestion? Firstly, he thinks that men and women by nature are all political animals. They're all political animals. And all men and women enjoy the fruits of power. So all humans, men and women, are all political animals, and they would like to strive for as many powers as possible. International relations is a projection of this human's evil nature. Why there's conflict between states? It's because the competition between states is a projection of the evil human nature. Humans decide to strive for power. Because everyone that strives for power, then there's a conflict between different states. This is a projection of the nature of humans. And then he suggests that private sphere and public sphere are two distinctively different spheres. So, private morality, private ethics should not be applied to public. So, so all statesmen 就係 in fact in English politicians 政治 politicians 就唔係叫政治家，就係叫政客。statesmen 先係政治家。All statesmen, that is all very wise person who lead the state, should be very clear-headed, should deal with international relations very wisely. How they could wisely deal with international affairs, first and foremost, is that they have to notice that political ethics and private ethics are not the same. So when you deal with international affairs, you should not be too honest to other states. If you be too honest, then other states will know your weakness and then know how to any chance to conquer you because of your weakness. So can't be too honest to yourself and also to your people. For the United States, Donald Trump. He always tell the public that Xi Jinping is his friend. He always mentioned that Xi Jinping is my friend in the Twitter. However, this is just a public relations strategy. Privately, he's very dishonest. He's very dishonest. In fact, he knows that Xi Jinping is his enemy. In fact, all big statesmen, you can name many big statesmen on the world, like Winston Churchill, like Roosevelt, like Kennedy, all of them are not, privately speaking, are not very a moral person. Privately, they're not. They have a lot of. They're not very dishonest. They have lots of private ethical problems for them. Like John Kennedy slept with a lot of women. Like Winston Churchill, he's very brutal. He also is very dishonest. But only those kind of people, because they can separate between private efforts and public efforts, they can rule a state well. Sometimes it's have to sacrifice a lesser good for a greater good. Say you have to be dishonest in order to, say, maintain peace. Say Donald Trump have to be dishonest in order to trap Xi Jinping to sign the trade deal with him. Okay, there are six basic principles. First of all, human nature basically a self-centered, self-regarding, and self-interest. So why there's international conflicts? Because this is the projection of this evil human nature. Secondly, politics is an autonomous sphere of action, which cannot therefore be reduced to economics and reduced to morals. So, international relations, we cannot simply say the conflict between states is an economic conflict. Why American wage a trade war with China? Not only for the sake of economic reasons, say would like to, say, get more job back to America. Not so simple. The main reason is because that's ideological reason. The U.S. is afraid of the rise of Red China, the rise of Xi Jinping's ideology. The third one is protecting their own security and maintaining survival. Politics is an regular expression of those interests which are bound to come into conflict sooner or later. So, because of the projection of human nature, and every state would like to secure their own security and survival, conflict between states are likely to happen. And then this one, as I mentioned earlier, that is political or situational ethics, which is very different from private morality. Private ethics, political, is different from public ethics. Two different issues. Okay, realists are opposed to the idea that a particular state can impose their ideologies on other nations. So, when America would like to impose ideology in Middle East, then it turned out to be chaotic, such as what happened nowadays in Middle East. The main reason is because American, regardless of the unique situation of the Middle East, try to impose democracy in Middle East. They end up into a chaos in Middle East. So, national interest for every state is you have to very carefully or soberly design international strategies, and you have to know the limitation of humans and human imperfections. So no more wishful thinking. The first task of all statement is to preserve the security of states. By preserving the security of states, every state should be careful that no wishful thinking could be applied in conducting international affairs. They have to know the human limitation and human imperfections. That is, imperfections. Say, Americans have to know that because Middle East is unilateral, democracy may not be applicable to Middle East countries. So they know that no more wishful thinking. Let them alone. Let the Middle East country alone. And American just concerned about its own security. Otherwise, if you don't concern the securities or your own security, would like to impose democracy in Middle East without thinking twice, then the end is chaotic. like the rise of ISIS, like nowadays the expansion of influence of Iran. That's the consequence. Okay, then another school called Realism. Realism, or called structural realism, because I will talk about later why they call structuralism. Structural realism. This school of thought rise in late 1970s. The main reason is because classical realism is the historical background for its rise is the end of Cold War. Not Cold War. The end of the Second World War. International relations scholars would like to find out why the reasons for the outbreak of Second World War. Then, for them, they were quite afraid of the outbreak of the Third World War. However, after 20-something or 30-something years, even though there were a confrontation between two major camps, that is, the capitalist camp and also the socialist camp. However, these two camps did not go to war. Why? That's a big question. So, the first question is how to explain the stable and peaceful, rather stable and peaceful in the Cold War period. Why the state-to-state relations were quite stable in this period, in the Cold War period. And then also there's transformation in methodology. And the past, international relations. Studying international relations is the same as studying history or laws. Even though now, in fact, this course provides you an old approach to study international politics. However, nowadays, officers also what am I studying? This is the approach I'm studying international relations. Is to use scientific approach. We have to conduct survey, conduct focus group. This kind of scientific approach. The use of scientific approach in international relations start in 1970s. Late 1960s. Late 1960s. What's a scientific approach? Firstly is use scientific methods. Secondly is parsimony in hypothesis, and then falsifiable theories. I think you know what are they. You all took research training courses, and then I do not need to talk about this again. Okay, then against this background, that's the rise of the Realism. Realism, the master of Realism is Kenneth Walsh. He's the master. Classical Realism. This school, it's not a school of thought, but this subdiscipline consider that. This sub-school consider that international conflict is a result of the projection of the evil human nature. However, for Realism, they don't think so. They think the struggle between states is not a result of the projection of human nature, but it's because of the anarchical structure. I mentioned anarchical structure earlier in the last few clips. You can refer to it. That is a lack of a structure. There's no world government to govern state-to-state relations. So, the three main elements in Realism. The first one is because of these anarchical structures. So, they have to seek for their own survival and security themselves. They have to seek for their own survival and security. For classical realism, state's intention to seek for their own survival and security is intentionally made by some wide statement. They know that's because international relations is a projection of evil human nature. So they have to carefully decide some foreign policy or even military policy in order to prevent their own state to be conquered or invaded by others. However, for Kenneth Walsh, he analyzed this issue from another angle. He thinks that state automatically respond to the facts of their survival. Automatically. All states, even no matter this state is governed by a very wise statesman like Winston Churchill, or stupid women like Carol Lam. This state, its first and foremost task is to maintain its own survival. This is destiny, and then this destiny is a result of the anarchical international structure. And for Realism, he thinks that the unit of study of international relations is sovereign states. And then there's no big difference between, for the intention of these states. All these states, no matter small or big, no matter their culture, they are Chinese, they're Confucian states or states influenced by Catholic Church, states influenced by Protestantism. All those states, when they deal with international affairs, there's only one mindset. That's just for survival. So, unit level variation is inconsequential. There's just no difference in the intention for all states in dealing with international affairs. All states, the task is to strive for survival. The only difference between states is the distribution of capacities. That is the national powers of the states. The difference in national power of these states is the key independent variables. I think you know what the independent variables are. Key independent variables to determine war and peace, alliance politics, and balance of power. Independent variables. This is relative distribution of power is the key independent variables. I will talk about this in details, I think, when I talk about world order, maybe 3 weeks later. But first of all, you have to know that for realism, the key independent variables to determine international affairs is the distribution of power in this structure. And the most important independent variables is the number of great power. Number of great power determines the overall structure of the international system and determines the likelihood of the outbreak of war in this system, and then whether this system is peaceful or not, or decide the alliance patterns. I'll talk about this, I think, 3 to 4 weeks later. Okay. Realism is a school of thought, mainly about power. Then, how do we determine power in international relations? Firstly, power. I think in year 1, I taught you the so-called 3 dimensions of powers. You have to bear in mind this concept, that is decision-making power, agendaing power, and thought control, these 3 forms of power. Power is not just coercive power. There are different formats of power. So when we measure the national capacity of a state, or the national power of states, traditionally, just about military power, just measure military power, because this military power is the most readily available source of power for coercion. You can, when say United States would like to force China to maybe sign a trade deal, the most readily available source to force China to agree to sign the deal is to say, if China doesn't try to sign the deal, then I will shoot maybe 3 I will shoot 3 nuclear bombs to you. Oh, not nuclear bombs. Shoot 3 nuclear missiles to you. Okay, China, because they are afraid of being bombarded by the nuclear missiles, then China signed a trade deal. However, if if military power is the sole component of national power, then the consequence they always goes to war. Then, of course, firstly, state when dealing with affairs with another state, they will calculate whether the outbreak of war is rational or not. If a state considers itself it is unlikely to win a war against another, say like Brazil, it knows that it is unlikely to win the war with the US, then Brazil must submit to the request from the US. The Brazil will not wait for the outbreak of war between Brazil and US and then forced by US to sign the deal. No, they know that they have no chance to win, then Brazil will immediately submit to the request from the US because Brazil know that they're weaker. Then how a state considers are weaker than others? Not simply by taking into consideration of its own military power, but there are other aspects, other forms of power, other factors. These factors are called latent capacity, because the state can, of course, normally, maybe a state is quite weak in military power. However, because of this latent capacity, when this state really goes to war in other states, then this state can change this latent capacity to be a source for strengthening its own military capacity. This so-called latent power include these components. I give a very good example. In terms of number of soldiers, North Korea is very strong. It's much stronger than South Korea. However, if North Korea and South Korea really go to war, then, of course, regardless of the intervention from the US, South Korea, this is quite normal that we think South Korea will normally, at the end of the day, win the war. Why? Because South Korea have a strong economy. A total population more than that's the same, but it has a strong economy. So when they go to war, South Korea can produce more military weapons in a short period of time than North Korea. And secondly, even soldiers, North Korean soldiers, when they go to the front line to fight the war, very soon they cannot receive enough supply of even food. But South Korea, because of its strong economy, all soldiers, they go to front line to fight the war. It is quite guaranteed that they get the supply from the home. So South Korea can fight a very longer war than North Korea. Okay, but contemporary just don't take into consideration of the military aspects of power, that is military power, as well as this kind of latent capacity. We also take into consideration of soft power, which address the second and third dimension of power as proposed by Lukes. This is a figure to demonstrate the there are a lot of index about composite national capacities, 综合国力. This is one of them. You may find that, like United Kingdom, you may think it is quite weak. However, because United Kingdom is very strong in soft power, I'll talk about soft power later. I'll go to soft power later, maybe 3 to 4 weeks later. However, United Kingdom is very strong in soft power. One of the best examples is many of you, not you, but many of your classmates decide to, secondary school classmates, they study in Britain for their undergraduate degree. And you may, after graduate from this course, you may go to Britain to take a postgraduate degree. So, why you don't go to China? Why don't you go to Italy? This is one of the characteristics of soft power. I say, maybe like Russia, quite strong militarily, but generally speaking, because its lack of economic power, its lack of soft power. So Russia just ranked 12th. Its composite national power is even weaker than India, even weaker than Australia, and just a little bit ahead of South Korea. It's because Russia, of course, very strong militarily, but in other aspects, in latent capacity, in soft power, very weak. So it does not rank high. So this is one of the example of so-called the index of composite national capacity. It's one of the index of so-called comprehensive national capacity. Comprehensive national capacity. There are other index. The result is a little bit different. Say United Kingdom in other index and many as index are not ranked second. But of course, first one in all index are United States. Okay, why does realism dominate? The main reason is because it could describe accurately the struggle of power in the 20th century. It could describe the outbreak of Second and First World War very accurately, and then also describe why peace can be maintained stably in the Cold War period. And it is also a guiding principle to foreign policy. Say, why American, Nixon in Nixon period, why American form a friendship with China. Main of the reason is because in the Cold War period, USSR once in the 1970s, its comprehensive national capacity ranked #1 in the world. United States ranked second. In order to prevent the whole capitalist system being dominated by Soviet Union, so the United States, Nixon went to visit Mao Zedong to form a friendly relations and then even a kind of alliance with China, so that these two states joined together to balance against the threats from Soviet Union. So, however, this is the guiding principle for foreign policy. A very good example of how realists can be guiding policies. And new realism is a scientific study or facilitate a scientific study of IR. Then, what are the criticisms of this realism? This school of thought nowadays is still the dominant school of one of the dominant school of international politics. Particularly in China. All Chinese, not Chinese, because I'm also somehow Chinese and also some Chinese overseas. But all Chinese living in mainland, all international relations scholars, Chinese international relations scholars living in mainland, they're realists, 90% of them. So this school is still dominant. But however, the school of thought, its influence has been declining since the Cold War. Why? The first one is the end of Cold War. And the end of Cold War rejects the balance of power theory. In the post-Cold War period, there are only superpower. One superpower is the United States. However, until now, there has been no alliance against USA. Why? Realists cannot give a good answer to this question. Why China, Russia, India, and also maybe Brazil have not yet formed an alliance against United States? Why? You cannot explain. Realists cannot explain. Secondly, as I mentioned in the last video clip, it is very hard for, according to realists, it's very hard for states to cooperate with each other, because all states would like to seek for relative gain. However, there are a lot of local multilateralism, 多边主义, that is international cooperation, in the post-Cold War world. You can see the growth of European Union. You can notice the growth of ASEAN 東盟。It cannot explain. Realists cannot explain. And one of the basic assumptions of realism is state is the most important agent of international relations, and international relations is to study state-to-state relations. Then, if we just study state-to-state relations, we'll miss the influence of non-state actors in international politics. Say ISIS, 伊斯兰国. Of course, in Chinese, its name is a state, but virtually this is not a state. This is a non-state actor. This is a terrorist group, and some international enterprises like even 成哥, very influential, and also some private individuals like Joshua Wong or 何韻詩 HOCC. I forget her English name. HOCC. They're very influential individuals because they persuade United States to sanction Hong Kong. They are very important actors in international affairs. Realists doesn't study them. Realists, or not doesn't, because realist is a plural. Realists don't study non-state actors, those enterprises, international terrorist groups, and also influential individuals, their role in international politics. So this school of thought is still very dominant today. However, there are in the past, in the post-Cold War period, you can say international relations, this discipline is realist is equivalent to over 70% of international relations, because 70% of international relations scholars were realist. Now it's down to around 30–40% of international relations scholars. They are now realist because there's a growth of other schools. Okay, then see you in the next clip.